Welcome to this special program here brought to you by Newsfirst. I'm your host Dhisal Kapuge, and today we are discussing about a very special day actually, and a day that highlights a very important animal to Sri Lanka. So today is National Leopard Day, and I have two gentlemen with me. They are conservationists and they've been very involved in conserving leopards in Sri Lanka. So we have Rukshan Jayawardene, who is a conservationist, and he was also the past president of the WNPS, the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society. And then we have Sanka Wanniatchi, who is also a researcher. He's been very involved with research activities in the past couple of years. So welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you.
Right, so to jump straight into it, so we are talking about the leopard. To bluntly ask you, Rukshan, what makes the Sri Lankan leopard so important?
Well, firstly, it is a specific, it's a subspecies,
right,
endemic to this island.
Mm-hmm.
So the Sri Lankan leopard is unique to this island. It's not found anywhere else. The Indian leopard is different. So Panthera pardus cotia, the third name, cotia, denotes its subspecific name.
Right.
So in Indian leopard is Panthera pardus fusca.
Mm-hmm.
Like that, you get a total of 9 subspecies that form the superspecies that is the leopard, Panthera
Right.
pardus.
And
No, that's not the only reason.
okay,
So there are 2 other important reasons what makes the leopard important. One is it's a keystone species.
mm-hmm.
It in a food chain, it occupies a position that is so important that if you remove that keystone species, like you remove the keystone of an arch, the entire arch will collapse. So the entire ecosystem will gradually collapse.
Right,
And thirdly, it is an extremely important animal in terms of economic value,
mm-hmm.
because people will come halfway across the globe to see a leopard in the wild in a country that you can actually see it. And Sri Lanka is one of the best places on earth to see leopards in the daytime.
Right. Now talking about the leopard, it is the apex predator of Sri Lanka, and obviously it's a magnificent creature, the only big cat in Sri Lanka. And people, I would say most people in Sri Lanka have a sort of fear towards leopards, because obviously it could pose a very real threat to human life. It's a very agile and very aggressive creature in the sense of when it comes to attacking. So most people have this fear of leopards. Is it an unwarranted fear? Should people be this afraid of the leopard, the Sri Lankan leopard?
No, it is an unwarranted fear, because if you really look at the leopard's world, we are not a part of it.
Mm-hmm.
The leopard lives in wilderness areas. Yeah. It might live in areas with a mix of wilderness and farmland.
Yeah.
But in the farmland areas, it will avoid humans and it will be very secretive or totally nocturnal. And only where there are no humans around will it be naturally confident to walk around in the daytime.
Right.
So national parks are such places where leopards have got used to the benign presence of humans.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why you can see them in the daytime,
Mm-hmm.
because their natural reaction to human presence is to be secretive and hide and observe,
Right.
and avoid.
Yeah.
So if that is the natural instinct of this animal, what is there to fear in it? Because we are not their prey,
Yeah.
and we are not. They don't see us as an enemy that they need to counter.
Right.
They see us as a potential enemy that they need to avoid.
Mm.
And so when we enter a national park or another wilderness area, we are entering their world as a strange creature that they really don't want to have any association
Yeah.
with. So
their natural response would be
avoid.
to avoid humans.
Avoidance.
Right.
Yeah.
Sanka, if I may ask you now, Sri Lanka thankfully has not had many incidents of leopard attacks or man-eater leopards as they are known.
Yeah.
I mean, we had a few incidents during the colonial era, the
Yeah.
Punani leopard and the Panama leopards, but we've had a few isolated incidents where leopards have attacked humans. Now, people living in the upcountry and also some of the land areas, they encounter leopards because they live in the outskirts of the forest. So if a person encounters a leopard, let's say they are on foot, they are alone, they encounter a leopard, what is the ideal thing you should do?
Yeah, first of all, should mention that it will be a very rare sighting to see one on foot, because they are mastered to ignore you, and to stay away from you, right? That's the first thing I want to mention. But if you do come across one, right, first of all, you should never run, because that will trigger its instinct to come behind you. Right. Also, the next one would be not to be at the level of the leopard, the same height, right? Because then the leopard will see you as the same level of height. So then again, there will be a problem. So the best thing is, if you do come across a leopard face to face, slowly back down. Don't make any sudden movements. Just be calm, because most probably if the leopard is not spooked, the leopard will try to avoid you.
And also, in some of the readings that I've done, I've learned that leopards don't necessarily come looking for humans to hunt them. That is probably because they're not in the food chain. But then we've seen incidents where leopards have attacked. So what provokes these attacks?
So it's like this again. If we let them be alone without going to their areas, now for example, forest encroachments, so if they lose habitat, they will try to come out of their habitat and come in search of food. So if we are in their way, and if we give them an opportunity to do so, they are the biggest cat in Sri Lanka. And
they will protect it.
What can we do with a leopard? We can't run. We are just normal human beings. We can't run with a leopard. We can't fight with a leopard. And you wouldn't know until a leopard come just few feet away from you.
So the best strategy is to avoid them as they avoid us. Right.
Can
now,
I add something?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. Now, taking off on what Sanka said, the not to get to the leopard's level. Well, if we get to the leopard's level and the leopard sees our eye height the same as the leopard's eye height, like if we get on all fours, then for the first time the leopard will quickly realize we are an animal that is leopard size, their size.
Oh, right, okay.
Because they judge size depending on the eye height of another mammal. And our eye height is way above the height of a leopard, because we are the only mammal that walks on 2 feet, 2 legs. And so the leopard is under a mistaken impression all the time that we are a much larger creature than it is, than the leopard. So that's something.
So Rukshan, this question is for you now. You were one of the past presidents of the WNPS. Now the National Leopard Day, and if I'm not mistaken, the WNPS was a front runner in declaring this and making sure that it's official. And it is also a fairly recent designation or declaration. Why did you want, or why did the WNPS promote this establishment or declaration of a specific day to commemorate leopards?
Well, there was a tragic death of a black leopard 2 years ago. I think 2020, right? May 28th. And initially, there was a big, for the first time, there was a lot of strong emotion in the country about the loss of that black leopard, because most people hadn't even realized that we had black leopards. And there were many mistakes made from the time that black leopard was first sighted, and then there were some camera trap photographs that came out that the Department of Wildlife had set some camera traps, and that they got caught in those camera traps. So, but a few months later, the black leopard was caught in a snare, and then it was released from the snare and to the custody of the Department of Wildlife, and the leopard died. There's a series of events that happened that probably shouldn't have happened in that way. It was a totally avoidable death and probably avoidable capture as well. So the WNPS felt strongly that the leopard needed a focused day so that we don't have tragedies like that happening in the future, to avoid another black leopard or another leopard dying in that way. But instead of having it on the day to the black leopard died on the request of the Department of Wildlife. The day was shifted to another day. The significance of this day, August 1st, is the day that Dr. Sriyani Mittapala long ago released her paper on spot pattern identification of leopards and genetic identification of the Sri Lankan leopard as a separate subspecies.
So that is the day it was declared that it's Panthera pardus scotia.
Yes. No,
Right.
confirmed. That
Confirmed, right.
the first person in 1956 or somewhere around there, P.P. Darniyagala, a famous paleontologist, archaeologist, who is zoologist as well, declared that, stated that the Sri Lankan leopard is a unique subspecies, and he named it Panthera pardus scotia. He gave the third trinomial.
Right.
So that only in the many years after him was Dr. Sriyani Mittapala in the early 80s was able to confirm through genetic studies that he was right.
Okay.
He just did it on just
Now
eyeballing it.
we have this National Leopard Day today, and also we know of the leopard. Everyone in Sri Lanka knows the leopard, and we do celebrate the leopard to a certain extent at least. But as a country, are we doing enough to protect the leopard? Rukshan, what do you think?
No, I don't think we are doing enough. I think we take this animal for granted. This animal has been with us for thousands of years, millennia, living side by side with us, because this country, as you know, has a long civilization, 2,500 years of agrarian civilization with buildings, cities, towns, irrigation, quite sophisticated. So leopards have lived through all those eras and the periods that people Anuradhapura period, living side by side, sometimes probably giving way territory to humans, and sometimes when there are times of decline, the leopard makes a comeback. But somehow it hasn't gone extinct. It's only in the 20th century that we see the threat, very real threat of extinction of the Sri Lankan leopard. And that is when conservationists start realizing that the leopard has to be better understood, better studied, popularized, and Sri Lankans must appreciate the animal that they have. Right. So it's ecologically important and it is economically important to us. So given those two criteria, which are absolutely, you can say impeccably economically important.
True.
And impeccably ecologically important. There is no substitution. You can't, if the leopard goes, something else.
Culturally important, right?
Culturally probably important. So, because of that, I don't think enough funds, enough attention, enough research is being done. I mean, there is more now than before, and we know more about the leopard. But I think we need to, there is the type of attention that the elephant gets, the leopard doesn't get still.
Also, but Sanka, if I may ask you, since you work with research a lot with regard to leopards, one thing that I came across is that a proper research or a census of leopards island-wide has not been properly conducted. Also, Rukshan, you can weigh in on this as well. Why is that? Is it that difficult to conduct a census of leopards in Sri Lanka?
Oh, I think to add to that, I think it's not an easy task just to do a research around Sri Lanka all of a sudden, right? Because it's not because the way you do a research would be to use camera trapping and a lot of resources are needed. So it's not an easy task to do a consensus like that. Now, for example, consensus are done for elephants, but it's a bit different when it comes to leopards.
Because they're elusive, is it?
Yeah.
Rukshan, you've been involved in it a lot?
Well, I think no successful census is done even for elephants. Basically, census counting. It's almost impossible to count elephants accurately.
Is it because of the lack of resources? Or?
No, because you can't, do a census, you have to know how many leopards live in a given area, and then without extrapolating, you can extrapolate that and come up with a figure, but those are not necessarily accurate figures because the margin of error is huge. Margin of error will be in the hundreds when the total population will be a few thousand or maybe a couple of thousand, let's say 1,500. Margin of error might be 500. So that's really pointless. So to count leopards, it's not possible. So what you can do is presence absence survey. Is a leopard present in an area? Is a leopard absent from that area? So given 1 square mile of Sri Lankan territory, present or absent. Like that, you go 65,000 square kilometers you can do by square kilometer and come up with yes, no, present, absent, whatever, and then map it.
So as of now, has that been done? Like, have we properly identified leopard habitats?
Yeah, I think you have to walk the ground.
Right.
So walk the ground, look for signs and map it. You know, you use maps, you use GPSs, and then you use GIS systems, and you actually walk almost every foot of that landscape looking for scat marks, scrape marks, any other marks, you know, old bones, kill sites, and then figure out whether there are leopards in that landscape, in that small area or not. And then you map each of them. So these are huge task. So they've done some of it. There are researchers who have done some of it where significantly north and east was absent because of the time. Because I think the war was just over and there were a lot of mines. So they didn't walk a lot of that landscape. So without walking the landscape, I of course think it's speculative. Your guess is as good as mine. You say, over there we didn't go, but we think there are leopards.
So is it correct to say that the leopard of Sri Lanka is to some extent understudied?
It is understudied, but leopards everywhere have been understudied. Only now leopard study is coming up to some kind of respectable pace compared to like lions or maybe even the snow leopard is better studied because it's a fairly unique animal and it's like the holy grail of big cats for a lot of people. So researchers got in there. Ghost cat. And even the jaguar is better studied. But because the first proper piece of research on the leopard was done by somebody called G. N. Bailey, working in South Africa. He took about 10 years to publish his work in a accessible book format. And that is a book that we have found as source material interesting to compare the Sri Lankan leopard in early studies of the Sri Lankan leopard. So I was part of a team that did an amateur study of the Sri Lankan leopard to try to understand its behavior and its everything about the leopard. And so a small publication came out as well at that time. And we formed a trust. Now it's 20 years on. But without those pioneering things, we wouldn't be at this juncture today. At least we are now talking. The WNPS has helped to declare a Leopard Day because of the interest and the enthusiasm generated 20 years ago. Because I have to mention somebody whose his name is late Harit Pereira, who said he wanted to do a book dedicated to the Sri Lankan leopard. So he had a untimely motor accident death, and then his friends got together, his wife as his widow got together and made his dream of a leopard book become a reality. So that I think started popularizing the leopard in this country to some extent, and that there were people who were actually dedicated to studying the leopard and try to ensure its conservation. So then latterly organizations like WNPS also got in on this. And
so either way, there is a long way to go when it comes to studying the leopard.
You couldn't even have a 5-minute sighting of a leopard those days. I mean, I'm aware of going back before 20 years because they just disappear. They just look at you and they just cross the road and go, or just hide, they jump down from the tree and walk off.
So observing them is extremely difficult.
So observing them was the key, the first step towards understanding them and the platform or the foundation for research. First is observations and then photographs and identification, individual identification, spot pattern identification. So lots of things happened in that time in an amateurish way, but that is the foundation for everything that came afterwards.
Right. So, talking about observation, now many Sri Lankans and also foreigners who visit this country are avid fans of safaris, and they like to trek in the forest, and on their agenda or the itinerary, spotting a leopard is almost always at top. And this has led to several situations in the country. I am referring mainly to safari parks, national parks, and recently we saw the Yala National Park. We saw bumper to bumper traffic. It looked like a photo out of the Rajagiriya junction in the middle of Yala. Now, it is impressive to see that people have this much of interest in leopards, but how does it affect the leopard habitats, their lives, Sanka?
Yeah, so it is somewhat unfortunate that the number of vehicles that goes inside a given national park, national park, is not controlled to a certain extent, which will actually affect the leopard's natural behavior. So, soon after, one example would be after lockdown, when the park was open, some of the people who visited the parks actually saw few of the carcasses, like hunts, very much closer to the roads. Now, one could say that number of vehicles trying to get the best angle of the leopard, best shot for a photographer, can actually break the natural habitat, the natural behavior of the leopard. So they will also try to, there will be some leopards who are comfortable with the vehicles, but there will be always leopards who will try to avoid it. So them avoiding it means they are breaking their natural behavior. So definitely that's definitely going to affect
an adverse effect, if you say.
Of course, yes.
So how do we control it? Like, is it up to the authorities or the people? What can they do to control it?
Both. It's responsibility of the photographers, to the safari jeep drivers, to the Department of Wildlife, everyone's duty to make sure that that does not happen. So the best example would be to limit the number of vehicles that goes to a park and have a somewhat a control, so that at least now, for example, block the Yala. If you take Yala, if you ask, your question was Yala.
Yes.
So if the number of jeeps are like at 1,000, so you need to control the first section at least by 200 or something. Just an example.
Yeah.
So the next set of people.
So right now, what is the number of frequency of vehicles?
I think the registered number of vehicles is around 1,100
per day.
No, registered number of vehicles.
Right, okay.
So 1,100. If you have more, they can go inside the park without a problem.
Right, okay. So roughly, I would say around 800, 900 vehicles make it.
Sometimes so.
The really busy days are like that, 800.
Right.
Otherwise, it's about 400, 500.
So that needs to be controlled.
Yeah. So the thing is, if I may add to this.
Yeah, sure.
Wildlife tourism, responsible wildlife tourism is what you could call ecotourism. Because if it's not responsible, then it is damaging and it has an impact that is adverse on the wildlife. When many years ago, when we started popularizing leopards, because we wanted Sri Lankans to know the leopard, because you can't appreciate or love something you don't know anything about.
Exactly.
And you mostly just fear it, because this is a big cat. We are not talking about a pussy cat or some bunny or something like that. It's like huggable. I mean, there are people who want to jump out and hug the first leopard they see, but that's just a state
not
of mind.
Advisable.
Not advisable. But so we knew that with the popularity growing about leopards will also come the adverse effects, the over tourism, the leopard centric tourism, which where numbers are not seen as a problem. You put more hotel rooms, more guests.
It's more profit oriented rather than sustainability.
Yeah, but that should have been managed by the government and the private tourism sector, the tour operators, so that we didn't come to this log jam that happens inside Yala.
True.
Because now it's up to the wildlife department to come up with a mechanism. They can't say you can't just reduce numbers. Yeah, you can't just cut numbers because there is a jeep mafia that will start leaning on the wildlife department through their friendly politicians.
All that,
So all that, but it is the duty of the wildlife department to come up with a mechanism to bring this situation under control, because as these numbers keep going up, now we are in a slump. The whole country is in a slump. So there isn't much pressure on the parks. But once again, when we see better economic times in Sri Lanka and more tourism, there will be a lot of pressure. So for that time, at least come up with a template. There is a study done on Yala and the tourism and how to limit numbers and what kind of mechanism to adopt. But that has just been ignored because there's a lack of political will to implement it. In fact, the current president, when he was prime minister previously, asked for that study to be done. But beyond something that is a bunch of papers, it hasn't got anywhere. So this is the problem in Sri Lanka.
And also, Sanka, now you've been working in Horton Plains for quite a while, observing the leopards there.
Yeah.
Now, Yala is a different scenario to Horton Plains completely.
Yes.
And it's a very known fact that the leopards at Horton Plains are very elusive. Now, I myself I have an addiction to Horton Plains. I've been there over 27 times. But I've never seen a leopard. I've tried so hard, I've never seen a leopard. Now, that's unfortunate on my part. And most people have not been able to see leopards. But since recently, there have been increased sightings at Horton Plains.
Yeah.
Is this something we should be concerned about?
Well, leopards are habituated to a somewhat extent. Let me tell you why. Starting from Pattipola entrance up to the office, that's the main road. Most of the people come there. I would say 99% of the people just visit Horton Plains just to go to the world's end and just look at Baker's Hole and just go home. Right. So now, when you look at the that road, it's right in the middle of one female who is very much popular these days. We have a team who actually study the movements of these leopards.
Right.
So we are right at the center of that her territory. So when she is habituated means they've seen humans, they've seen human activities, they are very much okay to see a human and they will not try to run and hide. So now with the recent cubs she gave birth, so these 3 cubs also now they are also again pretty much habituated. So it's matter of time that leopards will see humans. And mind you, Horton Plains is the only national park in Sri Lanka where leopards are there and you can walk on that roads.
Right.
Right. Other parks you can't get down.
True.
Yala, Vilpattu, you can't. Right. So here you can get down. So leopards usually they are scared of the human body. Yala, when you are inside the jeep, they only just see half of you. So they are not really bothered about it. They will see the vehicle and they are okay. But yes, they are also habituated to a certain extent. But here they see the whole person. So yes, they are habituated. And yes, as concerning, it can be concerning. But you can actually avoid these things by educating the public, saying that these are leopard territories, things not to do and things you can do. Likewise.
So now the two of you are a part of the WNP, as the Wildlife and Nature Protection Society. Can you talk a little bit about the work that you are doing through the society in order to conserve leopards?
Okay. Very recently, WNPS has come up with a research plan together with a professor who's a biologist, conservation biologist,
Right.
and there is a corporate sponsor, and it is to establish several leopard research centers for to monitor leopards in several parts of the country, representing both the hill country and the lowlands, lowland dry zone, both north and south.
Yeah.
And the objective is first to gather that base data, like I told you, presence absence survey, and then to monitor those local areas to see what kind of conservation needs are there for leopards. What are the threats they are facing locally, what are the ways to mitigate them, and also just to get raw data on leopards, in terms of numbers, activity, increase, decline, whatever.
Right.
And but I have to add that data security, when you do a research project like that, because you get a lot of data from all parts of the country, and you get a clearer picture of the status of the leopard in this island. That data security is very important, because wrong people getting that kind of data into their hands can be harmful to leopards. So, but the WNPS has a mechanism where there are academics who will if there are requests for that data for
Data
studies,
will be
made available, only checking the background and credentials of the researcher who is making the request.
Right.
And it will be reviewed by senior academics in the area who understand both the kind of student.
Now,
teacher.
so we speak about conservation, the importance of the leopard and all that. But then now Sri Lanka is going through one of the toughest times it has ever been through in recent memory. So people might ask the question now, with the economic crisis at hand and so many issues plaguing the country, should we really be concerned about a wild animal, the leopard or whatever animal? People might ask the question, should we really allocate our resources to this study? To that question, what do you have to say? Rukshan, you can continue after Sanka.
So, I think, see, now Sri Lanka is in a economic crisis, right? If you look at the tourism sector, a large portion for tourism would be wildlife. So, leopard comes always on top, right? So, if you are going to attract the foreigners to come down to Sri Lanka, we will have to conserve the leopard as well. If the leopard is not there, as Rukshan correctly said earlier, there will be economic crisis as well as ecological crisis. So, having said that, if we don't conserve the leopard, there will be dire consequences we will have to face because of that. That's on the tourism side.
Okay. Rukshan?
Well, if you started something, in the early 1990s, to study the leopard, to popularize the leopard, to have a better understanding of this animal so that Sri Lankans can appreciate it. And then there's some progress made where the leopard is much better known. Many more people have seen leopards than in the time when these early studies began. Because we go through an economic crisis, and there is a lot of human suffering as well, and basic needs people are trying to meet their basic needs. Does that mean that you drop the ball on something that you started to conserve, something that is a living resource for all Sri Lankans? There is a future generation who hopefully will live in a better time. I mean, hopefully this generation can enjoy better days, you know, regardless of whatever socio-economic background they come from, because all socio-economic backgrounds are going to be equally affected in the coming months and years. So the thing is, because you're in trouble, you can't drop your things that you know, you can't drop the ball on this one and pick it up somewhere again and hope that the leopard will be okay.
And by the time we probably recover from this crisis, the leopard might be in even more dire straits.
Yes, I think the threats to the leopard will go up when this economic crisis really deepens, because subsistence farming also becomes difficult as a way of life, so people might switch to alternate things like trapping animals, you know, poaching, basically putting snares, going into national parks, because national parks are also underfunded, under-resourced, and then killing animals there. There's always an international demand for, you know,
Leopard
wildlife
parts and all
products,
that,
leopard parts. Whether how well we are linked into those networks or not is very difficult to know. There is some international intelligence that comes to us saying that this country is targeted by international poaching operations. But how well it is linked up with local gangs and people who would actually supply that chain, we don't really know, because the wildlife department doesn't have the capacity to even safeguard the protected areas, the strictly protected areas like national parks that they have under their control. It's very difficult to look at other areas that don't have that statutory protection. But leopards live, as you know, in and out of national parks, in protected areas, outside protected areas. So this is a pretty
so definitely, I'd say it is important at all times to make sure that conserving leopards happens throughout the country. Unfortunately, I know we have a lot of things to talk about, but unfortunately our time has elapsed. So thank you all for watching. We had Rukshan, Jayawardene, and also Sanka, Wanniatchi with us, two prominent conservationists in the field of studying leopards in Sri Lanka. So as always, thank you for watching, and I would say happy Leopard Day.